Welcome to the St. Vrain Sports Report. We're glad to have you along with us. And it's kind of a sad day for us here at Channel 8, and we usually have Blaine Robinson here on the show this time of year to talk about basketball and preview the high school basketball season. But Blaine, we got you on here for another reason today, and why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, Brian. So today is the final ever episode of the St. Vrain Sports Report. And, a lot of sadness, a lot of gratitude. You've been here for a long time. Won't get into all the details, but essentially the city of Longmont, who we get our funding through by way of Comcast, they put our contract up for bid for the first time in 37 years. And, of course, we reapplied as the incumbent, and we were not selected. So there will be a new entity here. So we're closing our doors December 31st. This will be our final show ever. Just in case anyone in the community is interested, I do know that it is required in the contract for prep sports to be covered. Whether that's enforced, whether it's actually comes to fruition, remains to be seen at this point, but it is in the city's contract that the new entity cover high school sports.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that looks, but I know that we've had fun covering high school sports in this area for a number of years. I've been involved with the show since the fall of 2004, so for 15 years, and it preceded me. It went on for a number of years before that. I don't know how long, but Pat Graham, the prep sports editor before me at the Times Call, was doing the show along with Michael Rail, and Michael did it for a number of years, and so this show's been going on for a long time. But Blaine and I wanted to kind of take this show to kind of reminisce on my 15 years and Blaine's, I think it's 7 years you've been involved with the show. So first thing, let's take a look at a montage of things that Blaine has put together. Now these are just some videos from the last few years, just because we didn't want to leave anybody out, but a lot of the clips we have that are older, are on tape, and they're a little bit harder to come by. This is just from the last few years, but some great memories here of our last few years here of doing this show. Well, some fantastic clips there, Blaine, and fitting that we end with Frederick football from this season, but brings back a lot of memories looking at those, and so many kids that I know I've covered in 15 years, and you've covered in the last 7 that we couldn't even begin to remember their names. There's just so many of them, but watching that, I know when we're sitting there watching that, we're like, oh yeah, I remember that kid. He was so good, or she was so amazing. As a swimmer, Peyton Irwin, the Erie swimmer. A number of those Niwot swimmers did a great job. So what were some of your thoughts as you watched that clip?
Yeah, I think what you said, it was just about remembering people. And, that for me, that was pretty much my tenure. As you mentioned, those aren't all the things that have happened, but that was pretty much from the time that we went HD to now, and the stuff that's sort of digital and easily accessible. Everything before that was sort of on tape, and I didn't have time to go back and grab all that. So it was pretty much my entire tenure. So for me, it was like, man, that was my first state championship game, which was Silver Creek losing to Coronado, all the way up until, last weekend in Colorado Springs, Frederick's improbable, really Hail Mary to win it, basically as time expired.
Yeah, so just a lot of memories. And so I want to look at in the 15 years I've been doing this, there's been 50 state titles, Blaine. Now let's take a look at the list of this is not listing every state title, but by school, the 50 team state championships won by St. Vrain Valley schools since 2004 when I started on here. 50 total, 22 on the boys' side, 28 on the girls' side. Lions leads the way. Now that goes to their cross country and track program. 6 boys cross country and 5 boys track state titles. That's 11 right there. And then the girls track and cross country combined for 6. So that's most of them there. Niwot, 4 girls state titles in track there among the 14. Erie, those are all softball titles, as they were so dominant for a number of years in softball. Finally got back on track, or back on top this season in 4A. Silver Creek, among their 5, is the state title in football in 2012, Blaine. The only state title for a St. Vrain Valley school since 1997, even though we've had 9 trips to the championship game by St. Vrain schools. So 1-8 overall. Silver Creek winning the only one in the last 22 years. Longmont and Skyline with some state titles as well. But really, kind of putting together that list, Blaine, you start to think back again to some of the great teams we've seen.
Yeah, and not only the great teams, but the great individual performances, which are included in that, like you mentioned, cross country and stuff like that. Watching the highlight reel, I'm noticing Tommy Stager. We always chronicled him from his freshman year, sophomore, junior. He couldn't quite get over the hump. And then you saw that beautiful moment where he jumped into the stands to hug his dad, pretty much capping off his career with the state title his senior year.
Yeah.
Drake Ingleking won a couple. His dad was his coach. More recently, Lucy Liu, just a dominant run, and she's going to continue because she's not a senior, but just a dominant run in tennis. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, Rio Sanchez, she was one of the standouts that sort of you think about when you talk about the Erie softball program, spanning 2 coaches, as you know. So just a number of individuals that stand out, teams that stand out, and just it's really been incredible the amount of success this district has had.
Yeah, it really is. And I kind of want to run through kind of the schools in order here. We'll talk about each individual school here for a minute. But let's start with Longmont. It's kind of the flagship school here in town, but a number of coaches. And again, we're not going to remember everybody or be able to mention everybody. I know we're going to forget some people, and that's just inevitable in all these years of covering people. But some coaches that really, I'll remember from doing the show. Doug Johnson, obviously, has been the football coach at Longmont the entire time I've been doing this show. Mike Mers has been coaching the tennis team all these years. And Jeff Klosser of boys basketball has been there for a number of years. Holly Stetson in volleyball, and Jay Darian. It's been a number of years since he's been the girls basketball coach, but he led them to a great run for a number of years in girls basketball. And just the fantastic athletes playing. For me, it starts with the Wetterstrom family, Forrest and Annika and Sydney. Just some of the best athletes I've ever seen around here came from that family. Forrest, just a fantastic football player, and Sydney and Annika were just great in volleyball and track, and just a great family there. In boys basketball, you can go on and on about the number of players that Jeff Klosser's had, but for me, it started with Travis Armenta. That was some of the first Longmont basketball players I saw. Cade Klosser, Justinian Jessup, Luke Johnson more recently, In girls basketball, I saw Megan Carpenter, Jamie Katuna, Elizabeth Stover, and Matt Butcher in track and field. Two of the best track and field athletes I've seen, and we've had a number of really good ones. But Matt Butcher was fantastic in the 400 meters. Elizabeth Stover, still the best girls pole vaulter I've seen. The girl from down in Monarch right now is pretty good right now too. But Elizabeth Stover was unbelievable in pole vault. Nobody could come anywhere close to what she was doing. Great gymnast as well, by the way. But how about you for Longmont?
Yeah, I mean, in my tenure here, it was really the peak, the valley, and then the ultimate peak of the boys basketball program. I mean, you talk about 2 years that they entered the state tournament, led by Justinian Jessup, some other guys, Blake O'Grady, Kevin Mitchell, Eli Sullivan, and they couldn't get over the hump. And those were, I would say arguably, but maybe unarguably, the most talented teams he's ever had.
Right.
And so for him to get through that era without a state championship, you and I talked, on air, off air, would he ever get that elusive state championship? And then the unheralded kid who waited his turn, Luke Johnson, leads them to the promised land. That was beautiful for Luke, for the team, Oakley Denning, who I'll talk about specifically a little bit later in the show, but most importantly, Coach Kloster.
Yeah, and fantastic that he got that state title because, Blaine and I were talking about that going into that year, that has he missed his chance, because that was not Longmont's best team, that team that won the state title, but that was his state championship, and sometimes that's what it takes. It's just a matter of hitting things the right way. Things hit for that team. So anything else on Longmont before you want to move on?
No, let's move on.
All right, let's move on to Meade. We're kind of going alphabetical with the big schools here in town, and then we'll kind of move to some of the St. Vrain schools in some of the outer towns. But we'll go with Meade, and obviously they have not been around as long, but some of the coaches that have stood out for me, Jason Klatt has done just a remarkable job with that football program in recent years. Darren Reese with the boys basketball program has really done a fantastic job there. Ty Tatum, who is a longtime wrestling coach around here, not only at Meade, but I remember him from his days in Longmont. He did a great job with the Trojans before moving over to Meade when they opened up. Mike Ward, who's a girls basketball coach, he's helped out with other sports as well. And I remember him back starting with his days at Lyons High School. He's been one of my favorite coaches to cover over the years. And really, with Meade, Blaine, I think they're an up-and-coming program that we're going to see more of in the future. But when I think of Meade, I think of really great boys basketball and great football.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of success they've had in those two sports this is now really their 11th school year, but 10 years from the fall of 2009 to here we are in the fall of 2019. But yeah, the basketball program, I remember when they really took off and they had a grade 8 game against Longmont that was really their ascension at that point. That was the teams with James Marr, Walker Carell, Blake Goodwin, Michael Ward, and those were some really, really talented teams. Darren Reese, I believe, if he hasn't been their only coach, he's certainly been there for the entire time that I've been here.
He's been there for most of it, for sure.
And then in football, they took an absolute beating the first couple of years, and then they just burst onto the scene, and it's like Meade's been a perennial, top 5 team in the poll and throughout the seasons pretty much, the last 5 years. I think the one thing with them, and it could be said, better things are ahead, like we talked about with the Longmont boys basketball team. They've had some really, really talented teams and haven't been able to get it done. They've been the 1 seed multiple times now.
Right.
They just lost this 2 weeks ago as a 1 seed. And so, hold out hope. Meade's not done yet. They may not always have the talent that they've had in years past, but they've certainly got a chance to go far and do great things under Jason Klatt.
Yeah, and really, the girls' sports over there at Meade as well. The volleyball team's had some success. The softball team's getting, on track there. And speaking of track, Abby Glenn, one of the best athletes that we've seen around here now, a freshman at the University of Colorado. But the Glenn family, her brother, was the quarterback for a number of years. And but Abby, always kind of competed with somebody a little bit better than her, like a Taylor James, who's like a generational talent. But Abby getting her state titles, one of the best athletes, all-around athletes, in all sports, but especially at track that I've seen around here. She's been fantastic. So Meade is really, I think it's an up-and-coming school in athletics, for the next several years. they're going to be someone to be reckoned with. So, Meade obviously has provided some great memories in recent years as well. We'll move on to Niwot and, some coaches that for me, we're going to go back to my early days of working with the Times calling on the show. But some of the coaches that I remember, and Terry Ward is still there, but Terry has been there almost the whole time I've been there, and just does a great job with that girls basketball program. Loves girls sports and high school sports so much. She's such a champion for girls sports that she's really one of the true gems as far as a coach in this area. And really Niwot's been lucky to have her. This district's been lucky to have her for all the years she's been around. Ron Tassone, the longtime football coach, had great success with the Cougars for a number of years. Bob Bodie, who had kind of a rough ending there at Niwot, but one of the best baseball coaches this state's ever seen. Took them to quite a run in baseball during his time there. Maurice Henriques, the track coach, has taken that team to be one of the best in the state currently. They've won a ton of state titles. And Bobby Matthews is one that he's a softball coach, and I've known Bobby almost throughout the entire time here. He's worked at almost every school in the St. Vrain Valley, and I kind of joke about that because joked with him about that this fall. But he's worked at Frederick and Longmont and worked at a number of schools. But Bobby's been around for a long time. And Blaine, the number of athletes that have come out of Niwot is fantastic. I mean, you and I were kind of joking before we started the show that it's kind of been a Stanford pipeline. Yeah,
and it has, and it's really been remarkable because you wouldn't think that a school in a tiny town just outside of the big town of Boulder and Longmont would have, I believe 3 to our memory, standout athletes that went to Stanford.
4. Why do you think of 4?
4.
Yeah.
And the other thing that sticks out to me about Niwot is even though a lot of times on this show we're basketball and football focused and they have been in the absolute dumps in those sports and sort of cycling through coaches in each of them, they've had so much success through cross country, even volleyball, and then certainly track and field, and I think that's the athletes that come to mind, and you can talk a little bit more about them, but for me are probably Elise Cranny and Mackenzie Fidelic.
Yeah, soccer has been phenomenal as well over there, but really for me it goes back to Griffin Matthew, who was a fantastic girls track athlete. She was kind of that first one that I remember going to Stanford. Elise Cranny went to Stanford as well. Mackenzie Fidelic, who was right up there with Abby Glenn as one of the best all-around athletes that we've seen around here. We talked about Mackenzie so much on this show, that it was almost like she was here for about as long as we've been here. But she's at Stanford now. Taylor James is that next up-and-comer, in track and field, just doing great. I think she's a junior right now, and she's been one of the latest superstars. And for me, Blaine, one of the best athletes I've seen in this area, in all my years of covering high school sports, certainly the best baseball player comes from Niwot, Sean Ratliff, who graduated in 2005, I believe. My first year, up here in this area, he was a senior, and he was a punter and safety on that football team that was, maybe the best football team that I've seen around here. They didn't win a state title. They were 12-1. They got upset by Rifle in the semifinals, but he was a punter and safety and just the best baseball player I've seen. He went to Stanford as well. So, and that 2004 football team, by the way, led by Clint Stapp and Sean Ratliff and Thomas Bauer, a number of guys, really just a fantastic football team. But, Blaine, again, Niwot, so many athletes that they produced. And, tennis, you mentioned Lucy Liu, but tennis and soccer and track and field, those have been Niwot sports.
Yeah, tennis is another great example, and I'm glad you didn't, let us go through that Niwot section without mentioning them. I think both husband and wife Coronin are in charge of those programs, Miko and Amy, I believe. And they've just done a fantastic job, and they've always had a sort of that top flight talent on the boys' side, and then the girls' side was already good, but then getting Lucy Liu to come in as a freshman and just dominate, and she's got a couple more years ahead of her. I believe she's a junior as well. Yeah. So they're in good hands if the girls' athletics over there are headed by Lucy Liu and Taylor James these next couple years. Yeah, well, Niwot's been one of those fun schools to cover over the years as well. We'll move on to Silver Creek, where they've had a ton of success as well, Blaine. And for me, I'm starting with the coaches on all these, but Bob Banning has been a coach that's been there the entire time, the boys basketball coach, and one of my favorite people, one of my favorite coaches. And
I like a lot of you guys, a lot of you coaches out there, but Bob, near the top of the list, if not at the top of the list for me. Love him, love his family. Lindsey Banning, Kendall Banning, some of the best athletes I've seen in this area. Mike Apodaca was there a long time for football, led them to the state title. Dan Kloster was so great with that girls basketball team for a long time. And then Debbie Stewart has been the boys and girls swimming coach in the area for a long time. I think perhaps the entire time I've been there. And the amount of talent she's had in the pool, Blaine, has been unbelievable. Her daughter was one of them, but Lindsey Banning was another one. But they've had so much talent in swimming, and it's one of those sports that, again, doesn't go as noticed as some of the others, but they've been pretty dominant in swimming. Not a ton of state titles, but as far as this area, they've been pretty dominant.
Yeah, they have. They're always right in the thick of it. It seems like every time we do the rankings and the polls, they're in the top 3. It'd be a disservice to even say they're in the top 10. They're always in the top 3. And, going back to the coaches, Debbie Stewart's always been super gracious with me whenever I've wanted an interview. And, like you said, all the coaches are always good, but I don't know if there was a better media relationship between a coach and media than Mike Apodaca and Bob Banning. They really are outstanding when it comes to talking with us, getting us kids to talk to, letting us come to their practices and things like that.
Yeah, and for me, the Banning family, starting with Kendall, he was one of the boys basketball players. I mentioned Travis Armenta from Longmont, but those battles, when I first got here, between those Longmont teams of Travis Armenta and those Silver Creek teams of Kendall Banning and Nick McNabb, coached by Bob Banning, that was some of the best basketball I've ever seen around here. Just packing the gyms when they would play each other. That was fantastic. And then Lindsay, not only in track, but she was a phenomenal swimmer. Went up to CSU and actually participated in both up there. So, and at Silver Creek, Austin Apodaca, maybe the best quarterback as far as passing quarterback that I've seen in the 15 years here. And girls hoops and soccer, they had a run with a group of girls that was just fantastic. Megan Heimstra, Janelle Kramer, Aaron Gunther, J.C. Drobny was I think on the lower end of that group. She was on the younger end of that group anyway. Lauren Wolfinger was another one who I ran into earlier this week at a CU women's basketball game, and now coaching with Monarch. But that group was one of the best groups of girls athletes we've seen around here in a long time. Megan didn't play soccer, but the rest of those girls played soccer and girls basketball, and they were fantastic in both. They unfortunately ran into the buzzsaw that was Broomfield girls basketball and didn't get their state title. But maybe the best girls basketball team I've seen that didn't win a state title was that Silver Creek team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't recall, honestly, if Longmont did or not, but Longmont ran into that same Broomfield buzzsaw
right
as well.
After that group, yeah.
With Katuna and Megan Carpenter. And they came up short. And quickly before we move on, some of the Silver Creek standout athletes that come to mind for me are Riley Anderson.
Yep.
Just fantastic in track and field.
Four-time state champion.
Yep. Trent Dykema finished up a fantastic basketball career. And then in football, Isaac Miller and Anthony Casper really at the height with the Apodaca crew, really, multiple Apodacas. Those were two really standout football players. Kari Harrison after that.
Yeah. And then one last Silver Creek person I want to mention, maybe the most accomplished athlete that we've seen around here, and one of the best people I've covered is Valerie Allman, who was I think she's a state record holder in the discus and is still right now competing for going for the Olympics. She's one of the best discus throwers in the world right now. She was another athlete that went on to Stanford, but truly one of the best people that I've ever met around her, and just a great family, the Allman family there. Valerie, as far as what she accomplished, about as good as anything we've seen around here. So that kind of wraps up Silver Creek. We'll move on to Skyline, and Blaine, number of coaches there. They have not had the success in some of the big sports until recently that we've seen in some of the other schools. But for me, coaches, Bob Napton was a football coach who did a great job. Early when I was starting here, he got let go and moved on to Wyoming. After they let him go is when they really hit a really sour patch for a number of years. They went through a number of coaches. Bob Napton did a great job here. Michael Hogue in baseball really turned that program around and got the baseball program up and running, got the baseball facility built over there. Rachel Ayers in volleyball, she's now at Meade, did some great things at Meade. She's now the principal over at Meade. Mike Silva in recent years has done a fantastic job. And then Susan Jennings in girls golf was unbelievable. And I got there at the tail end of, they won 4 in a row girls state titles in golf. And I got there for the last one, but she was fantastic. Won another one in 2009. And Skyline, known a lot for that girls golf team for a number of years. And athletes, Kelly Jocks, she led the way there. Shane Zaruba was a baseball player and I believe a football player as well. That was fantastic for a number of years. And then in recent years, Jeremy Hollingsworth and Chase Silva. So there's been some great athletes there at Skyline as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of those coaches and people were during my tenure there when things like you said.
Yeah, there was a basketball player named Blaine Robinson that was there too.
Yeah, but like you said, the success wasn't there. So the standout athletes during at least the time that I was in high school didn't always get the recognition. So I think it's important that we give recognition to the Mike Silvas, the Jeremy Hollingsworth, the Chase Silvas, who have helped, the Austin Robinsons, who have helped turn at least the boys programs around. You can speak to this name, but just so we mention her, I didn't know her, I don't know her, and she graduated before I started at Skyline. But Tasha Harris may be one of the most popular Skyline athletes ever.
She was. Now, she was they won the state girls basketball title the spring before I got here. That's why I didn't mention them. But and I actually covered her starting her freshman year at Skyview High School. Then she transferred up to Skyline. And, one of the best athletes they've had around here. And that girls basketball team, that was, again, they won right before I got here. But that was one of the best girls basketball teams we've seen around here in a long time. And Tasha, about as good of a player that's area's seen in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, one more name for you. Someone I went to high school with, there was a fantastic athlete, Derek Bleeker.
That's right.
Just absolutely insane on the diamond, pitching and hitting. Went to North Carolina, then finished up at Arkansas, had a stint in the minor leagues, but maybe the best boys athlete in the last 15 years.
I'm glad you mentioned him because he was one of the best. I remember covering him as a freshman, and he looked like a senior. I was covering him at the state tournament. They were playing Thomas Jefferson, and there was a scout for the Angels that was there. And I ended up talking to him during the game, and he was there to watch, or maybe it was Cheyenne Mountain. I know it was at All-City Stadium, but I think it was Cheyenne Mountain they were playing. But he was there to watch the Cheyenne Mountain shortstop. And he says to me, he goes, "Who's this kid that's pitching?" I said, "Oh, he's a freshman." He goes, "What?" So I thought he was a senior. I was about to call my boss to tell him we got this pitcher to look at. Derek Bleeker was pretty darn good.
Absolutely.
Played basketball as well, played football. But as far as baseball goes, next to Sean Ratliff, Derek Bleeker might be the second best player I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go back up to the top. You can throw honorable mention to Brady Rank as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. The Rank brothers too. See, there's so many people that we've seen over the years. We can't. We're kind of remembering as we go along. But the Rank brothers were fantastic as well. Let's move on to Erie and kind of, I guess, the smaller schools. I guess when I first started, they were smaller schools. They've kind of grown. But Erie, softball, that's the first thing that comes to mind with Erie. And the coach is Bob Bledsoe. For a number of years was there leading that softball program. Scott Lighting for a long time led the track program. And then Larry Gartrell was the football coach for a number of years. Chad Cooper taking things over now. But those are some of the coaches, and again, a number of coaches over there. But Erie's had some success. And athlete-wise, Noah Roper, the last couple of years, as good as we've seen around here in a long time. And those early softball teams led by Holly Jordan, one of the best pitchers I've seen ever. I mean, she just was dominant, did a great job there. 12 state titles in girls softball. They won 10 out of 11 years from 2000 to 2010. The only one that didn't win, they were runner-up.
Yeah, that's just remarkable. And obviously that was before I started here on this show. But for me, the two athletes, at least in my short tenure, that rise to the top are Noah Roper and Rio Sanchez. And as much as I would like to, just gush and just say it's a one-person show and it's Noah Roper, they didn't get the very unfortunate injury, but they never got a state title. And Rio Sanchez, I believe, was able to get one. They were sort of in an up and down tenure after the remarkable 10-year run that you alluded to. But those two athletes for me during at least my short tenure here have been remarkable Erie athletes. Yeah,
some great athletes over there at Erie. And, move on to Frederick, where it's my hometown now. But a number of coaches over there as well. Thad Lear, who was the football coach for a long time, that he kind of turned things over to Travis Peoples a couple years ago. But Thad was there for a long time. Great friend of the show. Roger Dufour coached girls basketball and softball for I think 142 years,
Yeah.
somewhere around that. He's been there for a long time. And then Jerry Galway, it's been a few years since he was a wrestling coach there, but was the wrestling coach for a number of years at Frederick. And that school has not had the success, some of the team success that we've mentioned with some of these other schools. But Frederick, they've moved into a new building. They've got a lot of things going for them athletically, and they've had a number of great athletes as well. Lily Martin in recent years was one that she was a gymnast over at Niwot. That's the only team in the area. Lily Martin in track and field as well. So a number of good athletes at Frederick as well.
Yeah, for me, like you alluded to, Roger Dufour sort of makes me think Frederick athletics, especially when I first got here covering some fantastic softball teams, and then he also coached girls basketball. But I'm glad that even though they haven't had the team success and the notoriety always in this area and on this show, I'm glad that we sort of ended with a beautiful Frederick run in football, turning that program around. Yeah. And we were able to feature a number of athletes, Jake Green, Dylan Sindelar, Brandon Hornby. And so that school did end up getting their due, at least, on this show.
And they did have a couple nice runs in football, under Thad Lear, and then, of course, the one this year. And speaking of Lily Martin in gymnastics, I did mention it earlier, but Niwot gymnastics won a couple of state titles in recent years as well, Blaine, and so they've done a great job there as well. I guess our final school, Lions, the smallest school, one of the smaller schools in the area. There's Longmont Christian and Faith Baptist for a number of years, but Lions, we showed the graphic. They lead the way in state championships around here in the last 15 years, and it starts with Mark Roberts, and a coach that's been so good to us over the years and really just fantastic with that program over there. John Nichols was a longtime football coach. Now, we've talked a lot about Lions football in the last couple of years, how they've really struggled, but when John Nichols was there, that was one of the powerhouse programs in Class 1A, and they didn't win state titles, but that's because Akron was the team. But John Nichols had that team as one of the powerhouses. Jason McGuire for a number of years was just a great coach. And then Kathy Lighting, the athletic director, the wife of Scott Lighting, was so fantastic, such a friend to the show as well. As far as athletes over there, it's got to start with the Roberts family, doesn't it?
And it's probably got to end with the Roberts.
There's been a ton of them.
And it's probably got to end with the Roberts family. Yeah. You can speak more to knowing the whole crew. For me, in my years here, it was Paul, it was Miriam, it was Isaac, and I guess you can throw in Colton John Jack Plon as somebody who comes to mind and won a bunch of track and cross country things as well. But it starts and ends with the Roberts clan, and for me it was Paul, probably the most accomplished out of all of them, but certainly Miriam and Isaac in my time here.
And before that, Andrew, the oldest, he was one of the best cross country runners I've seen. Paul eclipsed him, but Andrew's still around helping out coaching. He's got a family of his own now, and it's been fun watching him grow. And for me, Blaine, that's one of the fun things about this show and doing it for 15 years is there's so many kids now that we've talked about that I now see as parents. Lindsay Banning, Kendall Banning, they're parents. They've got families of their own. Andrew Roberts has got a family of his own. These kids are now coming back. They're helping. Lauren Wolfinger, I mentioned, is now coaching, helping to coach at Monarch. These kids are coming back to the area and helping out. It's really fun to see these kids that we saw as 16, 17, 18-year-olds now coming back as adults and doing things in coaching and having families of their own. And a couple of things I want to mention. Schools that we don't really talk a lot about here, Blaine, were Longmont Christian and Faith Baptist. But a couple of people I really want to mention that early in my years doing the show, had some great runs with their teams. Jerry Martin over at Longmont Christian in football and boys basketball. He was the AD for a number of years. They were a really dominant 8-man program. And then Faith Baptist, when I first got here, the very first event I covered at the Longmont Times Call, and right before I started the show, was what was called the Bible Bowl. And it was an 8-man football game between Faith Baptist and Longmont Christian. And Faith Baptist was not a Shasta school, but a very dominant 8-man football program that they won 50-some games in a row, coached by Randy Peterson, and they were fun to watch. And once he retired, that football program kind of went away, and it was just a couple years after that that they gave up football and went to soccer, and then eventually just athletics kind of disappeared a little bit over there. But Randy Peterson, Jerry Martin, a couple of the small school guys I want to throw out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I told you one athlete that I'd come back to at the end of the show that this is not just to put him on a pedestal above anybody else, and I don't know him personally, so there's no tie-in there.
Yeah.
But one of the kids that really I'll always remember about my time here was Oakley Denning. The first thing when he burst onto the scene, he was a freshman at Longmont. They're playing Windsor, who was undefeated at the time. We've got some clips here of that, and he gets thrown into a game. The starting quarterback, the senior, gets injured, and Oakley Denning delivers. They were losing 6-0, I believe, or 7-0, and he throws that pass to Eli Sullivan, and that was the beginning of just a remarkable run for Oakley Denning. He hit timely three after timely three. You see that one down in Falcon, Colorado, in a 5-4 matchup in the year that they won the state title. This was the game-winning three in the year they did win the state title, beating Lewis Palmer. Oakley Denning hit a winning three with about 20 seconds left, and Longmont was able to win. Longmont, once again, they were playing the number 1 seed Meade Mavericks, coming in as underdogs at Meade High School, and Oakley, with the heroics to scramble the backyard football drill, leads an upset over Meade there. And then just this past spring, his senior year, he gets a massive offensive rebound against Harrison, who had him dead in the water, and Oakley Denning sends them back not only to the Final Four, but another state championship appearance. They fell just short. But I mean, it seems like when you use the word, remarkable or iconic moments, Oakley Denning in my time here just had moment after moment after moment. And not to be outdone by his athletic achievements, I believe he's at MIT right now, which just goes to show you the brilliance he displayed in the classroom as well.
I would say one of the smartest kids that we've had around here as well. And just a ton of great athletes, not only in the classroom, but on the playing field as well, or the court. And so many kids like that, like an Oakley Denning, that may not have been the biggest superstar, but came up in big moments. And so many athletes that really were kind of role players that we got to know, and just there's so many that we featured on this show, Blaine, in the 15 years I've been here, the 7 you've been here, that just great kids, and it's been fun covering them.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. We want to, from everyone here at Longmont Channel 8, we want to thank, everybody that's put blood, sweat, and tears into not only the production of this show, but before it was this show, but when it was Sports Talk, when they were doing Game of the Weeks, going out with a live crew, and running cable into the gyms when I was in high school. So we do want to thank everyone who's put blood, sweat, and tears into any broadcast publications here at the Longmont Channel, and it's been a remarkable run, Brian. You've been here longer than I have. You know many more people than I do, but this has been a great place to work. It's been the only job I've had since out of college, so we do want to just express sincere gratitude. Yeah, and for me, this has been kind of a fun side thing to do. It's your full-time job, but it's been a fun side thing for me. I want to go back to a guy that I mentioned at the top of near the top of the show, and really give a shout out to Michael Rail, who was hosting this show back when it was Channel 3 when I first started. And like I mentioned at the top, he was doing the show long before I was, with Pat Graham. And I want to give a shout out to him because Michael did a fantastic job in the show for a number of years. Not only this show, but broadcasting Game of the Week. He would do the play-by-play for the Game of the Week that we did for a number of years. And I want to thank him for, I had never done any TV work in my life, and me coming in here, he really helped me along, show me the ropes on, all I had to do was kind of sit on the couch and be his co-host, but really kind of showed me, gave me my introduction to TV, gave me opportunities to do some color for some of the Game of the Week broadcasts. And Michael Rail, I can tell you, it's been a number of years since he's done this show, but he had great passion for high school sports and really made this show go for a long time. So I want to give a big shout out to him. But also, as we wrap up, Blaine, I want to mention you and all you've done over the last 7 years in producing this show, helping me out, getting so much video, and just helping me in the studio here, doing all the things. Don Gurton, I always thank you guys behind the scenes. Don belongs not on camera because he's got that face. So do I, but I have to be out here. I'm kidding, Don. But Don done so many things. He started. I think I started doing the show September 2004. He came aboard about 2 months later, so we've been here about the same amount of time. General Manager Tim Chafin has been here, all those years as well. So a ton of people to thank. And is there anybody else that you want to mention before I kind of sign off here? No, I mean, just I would say definitely Tim Chafin, general manager, and all the time you've been here. Don Gurton, it was the reason I'm sitting here right now is because, I met Don through doing some special video productions for the Skyline basketball team when I was in high school. And then just a number of stringers we've had, from Paul Howard to Jared Clifton, Tim Ellis, Quinn McCain, and everyone who's put, like I said, any blood, sweat, and tears into this show. We just want to, give you our sincere appreciation.
Yeah, and some of the Longmont Times Call prep guys that have been on the show before as well. Race Subcheck, Justin Williams, Pat Graham, in recent years, Brad Kochi. So a number of guys have helped out there as well. And I want to encourage you, even though we're going away, to continue reading BocoPreps.com and the Longmont Times Call as they get you up to date on everything going on in high school sports. They do a fantastic job. And me being on that newspaper side of things, I encourage you to support that local journalism. It is so important, for you to support that, or else that's going to go away at some point as well. And those guys do a great job over there. So I urge you to continue doing that. And Blaine, as we sign off here, I just want to say thanks to the viewers for all these years, not only the 7 years you've been here, but the 15 I've been here, and even before that, all you viewers, whether you've watched all these shows, one of them, however many you've watched, we want to thank you for watching. We've enjoyed doing this show. We've enjoyed getting to know all the athletes, all the coaches, all the administrators over the years. Again, sad day for us that this is the end, but it's been an enjoyable ride.